Because the whole point of these conversations and the whole point of these practices is for you to notice something that's already the case, is for you to notice something that has never not been here, for you to notice something that is the truth. And that does not require that this program that's running stop running. That doesn't require that the program that's running stop running. And so, yeah, it is the case that when you first come in contact with these teachings and practices, obviously the only possibility is for you to come in contact with them as a person. And therefore, the person becomes interested in these teachings, right? Because the person sees these teachings as a way of getting something. You know, the person sees these teachings as a way of getting something, as a way of adding something, as a way of accomplishing something, as a way of producing some kind of outcome or some kind of result. So that's understandable. That's just the way it is, right? Where I'm coming from and what how I'm dealing with this is that if I continue to point to the awareness rather than to deal with the person as if the solution to whatever the problem is going to come from the person, right? If I continue to point to awareness, the idea is between the teachings and the practices, the idea is at some point you'll begin to notice that what I'm pointing to. At some point it will be revealed to you that awareness is here. Awareness is what this is all about. And that doesn't mean that you have to change. It doesn't mean that the person has to stop existing. It doesn't mean that the program has to stop running. Because as I have said many times here before, all that's necessary for you to be enlightened is to see the truth, is to see things as they are. All that's necessary is to see things as they are, to see what you are, to see the way it is. And in the process of doing that, there is going to be an inevitable reality where the person will attempt to do that. There's no other way, because you don't, because there's no, you don't have any other place to come from. There's no other way. So the person will attempt to be what it is that is being spoken of here in terms of the self. The person will attempt to be what it is here when we're talking about awareness. So that's what will happen. So if I ask you, see, here's the thing. If I ask you to ask questions, I know the questions will come from the person. I know they'll come from the person, right? But in the process of interacting with the questions, right, it may be possible to recognize the futility of the person's attempt to accomplish something that's already true. That's the joke, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, so the whole conversation with the person is to try and dance. The whole conversation with the person is to dance the person out of the misunderstanding, to dance the person. You know, when you're dancing with somebody, right? It's an interesting phenomenon, dancing, right? When you're dancing with somebody, once the dance is happening, once you're moving together, it becomes possible for you as one of the dancers to start to move in a way that the other person's moving with you, right? Yeah, that's dancing, right? So that's the same thing here. It's the same thing in this process, that while it may be the case that you can't come from any place other than the personality, the conversation is the dance. Right? The conversation is the dance in which, by interacting with you about the personality, right, it will become possible at various points in time for you to simply notice what's always here, what's always here, what's always available, what has been unseen, what has been being ignored, starts to get revealed between the teachings and the practices. Because in the practices, you're sitting still, you're eliminating a lot of the territory that the mind occupies. You're eliminating a lot of the ways that you show up in the world as a person, right? Because you're not doing anything. You're just sitting here, you're just being here. So it becomes more possible to notice what's always present. It becomes more possible to notice there's an awareness here. And this awareness that's here is not being affected by what's happening. The screen is not being affected by the movie playing on the screen. That's all there is to get. That's all there is to get. Of course, obviously, then the next thing is that the recognition that which is unaffected by everything that's constantly changing and constantly happening is the truth, is you, is reality. So it's kind of like when you look at it, the conversation and the questions and the answers and the interaction is a dance. It's just an inevitable reality that has to happen. But the questions and the answers and the dance are not intended, they're not intended to go anywhere. There's never going to be enough answers to questions for you to get to where you already are. There's never going to be enough answers to questions to get where you already are. But we will have questions and answers, right? So we can keep dancing with that stuff. But the stuff that we're dancing with, the content of the stuff we're dancing with is pointing to something all the time. It's pointing to what's already the case all the time. So that at some point you can begin to let go and relax and surrender because that which is being pointed to all the time is here all the time, and that which is being pointed to all the time is never affected, and that which is pointed to all the time is always at rest. So when you're sitting, for example, in meditation, if you persist in practicing meditation consistently over time, right? You will literally outsit your mind. You will literally outsit your mind. In other words, if you're persistent enough that you just keep coming back and sitting there and being quiet and being still and being silent, sitting there being quiet, being still and being silent, attending, noticing, being aware, and you just keep doing that, and whatever is there keeps changing all the time. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, memories, keeps changing all the time, right? If you keep doing that, the awareness that's there will start to become more apparent. It will start to become more apparent as that which is not moving, that which is always still, that which is always available, and that which is actually who you are, what you are. So that at some point, it becomes a real ground. It becomes a real ground to stand on. It starts out that it doesn't even exist. You have to understand something, that when you're being the person, awareness doesn't exist. Does it? No, it doesn't exist. Awareness doesn't exist when you're being the person. The only possible way that awareness could exist when you're being the person is the person thinks that the person's aware. Right? That's the only possibility for awareness if you're being the person, that the person thinks that the person is aware. But the person's not aware. The person's not aware. Because there is no person to be aware. So the beginning of the end starts. The beginning of the end starts. Because now what we're doing is we're saying, okay, You may only understand what's being said here conceptually if I say to you that the person's not real. You may only understand that conceptually, right? But that's the beginning of the end anyway, because now you have something to contemplate, you have something to consider, right? Because if I say to you, you know, I know that the best you can do is to think that you're aware as a person. I know the best you can do is to think you're aware as a person. But then if I say to you, okay, let's just do an exercise, and I keep coming back to this because for me it was a very clear experience. Let's just do an exercise and ask you, can you as a person be aware of your entire body? So you know, you do that and you're aware of your entire body. And then I simply ask you to look at what the evidence says. The evidence says, if you can be aware of your entire body, you cannot be inside that body, you must be outside that body, yes? Yeah, so the evidence says that the awareness is aware of the body. Not the person is aware. The awareness is aware of the body, not the person is aware. So I'm asking you to look. Because this whole process of waking up is a matter of looking. It's a matter of looking and seeing directly what the evidence is versus your interpretation of the evidence, right? Because for the most part, even who you think you are is an interpretation of the evidence, isn't it? Who you think you are is an interpretation of the evidence. And when you investigate who you consider yourself to be, what you find, if you actually do investigate it, right, is there's no evidence. There's no evidence for who you've counted on, for who you've considered yourself to be. Upon investigation, there's no evidence for it. There's no evidence for it. All there is, if you look, is what's happening, awareness. This is a very simple model. This is what the evidence shows us. If you look, if you just slow down and investigate, right? What there is awareness and what's happening, right? This is not that hard. Look, if you look what you see, there's awareness and what's happening. That's always all there is, awareness and what's happening. Isn't it true? That's always all there is, awareness and what's happening. Right? That's what the evidence is. There is no person there. It's not there. There's awareness and what's happening. There's no person there. So how does the person show up? The person shows up because part of what's happening is thinking there's a person. That's just part of what's happening, is thinking there's a person. But there's no evidence for a person. So this waking up is a process of simply beginning to understand that it's possible for you as awareness to look and see what's so, to see things as they actually are instead of the interpretation about everything. And when you do that, when you look and you see things as they actually are instead of the interpretation about everything, two things become obvious. If you do the looking, two things become obvious. One is that who you thought you were doesn't exist. There's no evidence for it anywhere, right? Who you thought you were doesn't exist. And who you really are has always been here, unrecognized, unseen, unknown. So something becomes possible that wasn't possible before. It wasn't possible before for you to experience the truth. It wasn't possible before to experience the truth because the only way you can experience the truth is to see it from the reality of what you are. The only way you can experience the truth is to see it from the reality of what you are, not from a point of view of a person that's something that's not real. You can't see the truth from a position that doesn't exist. That's not possible. That's where the problem is. That's where the confusion comes in, right? Because when you come here, you as the person, right, will attempt to see something. You as a person will attempt to see something from a point of view that doesn't exist. So that's what there is to point to, you see. You as a person will see something from a point of view that doesn't exist. It's a made-up point of view. It's a made-up point of view. It's a made-up position. It's a made-up point of view, and it's a made-up position for a made-up person. So what this is all about is to slow down and stop and be still and be silent in order for you to begin to gradually recognize that there is an awareness here that can see what's happening directly versus the interpretation of it by an imaginary person. The awareness can see what's actually happening versus the opinion, the perspective, the point of view that the person has. And that person doesn't actually exist. So when you begin to gradually wake up and notice the truth, notice the awareness that you actually are, a possibility comes into play that didn't exist before. The possibility of the truth, the possibility of seeing things as they actually are. And the way you know, the way you can know you're seeing things the way they actually are, is things that were unworkable start to work. Things that were unworkable start to work. Because now you're actually here seeing what's happening instead of being in your head, interpreting what's happening and reacting to what's happening and suffering because you keep missing the mark, suffering because it's not working. So things get simple. You know, when you start to wake up and see things as they are, things get simple. You begin to realize that it's possible to simply experience life as it is and to be what you actually are. And when you're being what you actually are, experiencing life as life actually is, it works. It works. Because what you actually are is not a position, is not a body, is not a point in time. What you actually are is the awareness that can be present to anything. What you actually are is the awareness that can be present to anything, that's unaffected by anything, which means you can be with anything. You can be with life. You can be with the way it is. No matter how it is, you can be with the way it is. So it's this awareness that's always present, and when we practice meditation, that's what we're looking to notice, right? We're looking to notice that awareness and then to be that, to rest as that. So as you sit there during the practice time, things will keep changing. Thoughts come and go, feelings come and go, physical sensations come and go. There's an awareness of that that's always there no matter what's happening. There's an awareness of that that's always there no matter what's coming and what's going. And that awareness isn't coming and going. And that awareness isn't changing. And that awareness is you. And that's what there is to get. To the extent that you get that, to the extent that that becomes revealed, to the extent that that becomes available, to the extent that that gradually becomes your orientation, becomes the awareness that you are. The light of that awareness being the light of that awareness shining on what's going on will have what's going on be seen for what it actually is. That's pretty clear, right? When you turn the lights on, when the light of awareness shines on what's happening, you can see what's happening for what it actually is. It's not a mystery anymore. It's not a mystery anymore because what begins to become evident is what's happening is what's happening. What begins to become evident is what's happening, and your being with what's happening is all that's necessary. Versus what's happening is what's happening, and your interpretation of that leaves you with a judgment and evaluation about it that has what's happening not be okay. That's the source of suffering. Source of suffering is when you are being in the world as a person, that person has conditioning. And when you're being in the world as a person that has conditioning, the conditioning is determining whether or not what's happening is appearing to you, is occurring to you as good, bad, right or wrong, acceptable or unacceptable. That's the automatic machinery that runs. That's the program that's running all the time. So this possibility is a possibility of getting out of being stuck in that state of mind. It's a possibility of getting out of being stuck in that state of mind, seeing that state of mind for what it is, being free from the effect of thinking that that state of mind is reality. Doesn't that make sense? Being free from thinking that a state of mind is reality. It's a state of mind. I don't even know what your question was. What was your question? Yeah, you begin to see things for what they are, and part of what you see for what it is, it keeps coming back to this. You begin to see things for what they are, and part of what you see for what it is, right, is that you have no say-so about any of it. If you begin to see things for what they are, part of what you see is that you have nothing to say about it. You have no say-so about any of it. That's why this whole free will thing keeps coming up. I was listening to Sam Harris podcast, I think it was last night. And if you want to read a good book on free will, if you dare to read a good book on free will, because if you have the free will to read a book on free will, right? He has a very good way of breaking it down so it becomes absolutely clear and absolutely obvious that free will is an impossibility. That, one of the things that he did that I hadn't heard anybody do is he actually said, okay, if free will does exist, let's examine it, right? And he actually breaks it down in terms of investigating free will, all right, to the extent that you can see that it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. There's just no such thing. And it's not hard to see if you really take a step back and look, right? Because who is it that's going to have the free will? If I say to you, if you look at the evidence says there's awareness in what's happening, right? Who's going to have free will? We'll have the illusionary free will. Right? Yeah. Because in order for there to be free will, there has to be a you that has free will, right? So we're only talking about the same subject from another angle, right? Because isn't it the case that we have thoroughly investigated whether or not there is a you that is a physical body, a you that is a personality? That's the whole point of inquiry. The whole point of inquiry, and inquiry is something, if you look into these teachings, that word comes up a lot, right? Self-inquiry, inquiry. Why are we inquiring? Why are we inquiring? We're inquiring because if it's possible that the reason we're suffering is because we're not seeing something that's there, maybe we should inquire, right? Well, you see, the thing is this, and here's why I said yes, right? Because if it is the case that that the you that you thought you were doesn't really exist, right? If you take that out of the picture, what's left? Well, yeah, what's left, because if it is the case that there is a source, right? The evidence speaks pretty clearly that it looks like there's a source, because it looks like this is not chaotic. It looks like there's organization here. It looks like there's intelligence here, right? It looks like there's a source, that this is coming from somewhere. That seems to make sense, right? So if it looks like there's a source, and that source is a source that is the source of all of this manifestation, then if you accept the evidence, which says that the you that you thought exists isn't real and doesn't exist, right? And if there is a source, then that source is the source of it all. right? And when you hear about this and when you hear about free will, the mind reacts to it. The mind reacts to it because the existence of the identity that you've been being is based on the idea that you have free will, isn't it? The existence of the identity that you've been being is based on the idea that you have free will. If you take the free will out, right, the person can't exist, can they? No. Can you exist if it's not possible for you to do anything? That's absurd, right? On the other hand, if you take the free will out and you're willing to actually look and see what would it be like, right, to see things as they are, to see things as they are in terms of that thy will be done, that the source is the source, not you, right? If you see things that way and you begin to look from there and you begin to be in that space of awareness and you begin to experience what that's like, you begin to see what it would be like to be enlightened. Because if there's no free will, then you can take your place. You can be where you are. You can be in the situation you're in which you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to control it. You can dance with it, right? You can dance with it. You can allow it to be the way it is. You don't have to continue to insist that it should be different.